Hello. In this episode of Together at GRCC, I speak with a trustee who also leads the Steelcase Foundation. He shares his journey in education and philanthropy, his commitment to advancing equity in the workforce, and how his leadership on state and local initiatives is shaping opportunities for students. Our guest also discusses his role on the Board of Trustees, the importance of community partnerships, and his vision for the future of the college. Please welcome Trustee Daniel Williams. Welcome to Together at GRCC.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Just to start out, could you share a little bit about your professional journey and what initially inspired you to become involved with Grand Rapids Community College?
Yeah. So my professional journey started when I was an undergrad doing some summer work with kids whose parents were incarcerated and really connected with that, with middle school age kids and kind of wondering and thinking about like how systems and other structures are impacting, 13, 14, 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
From that, I went and worked at an HBCU in Virginia, Hampton University, as an admissions counselor, and loved that job, especially as a young person, getting to travel and meet high school kids all over the Northeast, which was my territory. And really what stood out to me, like no surprise, is just the incredible spectrum of experiences that young people were having, depending on where they were, depending on the district they were in, depending on socioeconomic, depending on the particular school they went to. And I found myself engaging with really just brilliant young people who were, and just trying to coach them onto, all right, like, so we need to do this. You need to take 2 more years of science. You need to, and really spending that time to coaching them into how to even get to a point where they could apply to Hampton.
Okay.
And that experience really just cemented that K-12 space was really where my heart was at that point. And moved to Detroit, started working at a K-8 school, continued in my educational journey and got a master's degree in ed leadership, continued to work there, and then moved to Grand Rapids, 15 or 16 years ago now, to help found University Prep Academy, and was the principal there for the first 8 years of the program, which is a part of Grand Rapids Public Schools. Yeah. Moved at the end of that process and moving into a role.
It's hard to move on from that experience because that seems like something you built from the ground up, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, it was so hard. It was really hard to leave that. And I think one of the things that is really important for me to keep in mind and continue to remember, now that I'm so far removed from being in the school building, was just how difficult it was day in and day out to really lift your head up and like be able to vision and think more broadly about systemically what's happening in the world. It's like you come in, you've got breakfast at 6:45 and 3 subs, teachers didn't show up and only 1 sub came, and what are we going to do? And this thing happened and there's this and this, at the time it was Facebook. It was like some kids were arguing on Facebook. There was all—
We call that putting out fires.
Yeah, it was all the fires.
Yeah.
Which I loved, and I loved the engagement with the kids, and I loved the engagement with staff and building something, and felt like in that there was an opportunity at that point in my career to think about what another avenue might be to engage more holistically with families, and that's what led me to WMCAP.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like you really think about things systemically and how all of the different types of education systems fit together and how they impact one another, and kind of looking at that flow from one district could be completely different from another, it sounds like. And just people's individual experience and how that shapes so much. It shapes what we think is right and what we think is good or not. It really shapes the way in which we engage in our work broadly and with each other. And so I think it's just one of the things that I have really continued to try to pay attention to is
the complexity of all the things. Like
Yeah.
kids don't just like appear from the sky and like rappel down and just exist, right? They're a part of a community, they're part of family, they're part of church groups, they're part of extracurricular activities. There's all of this, and adults are the same way. And so how we think about all of our work in a more holistic, multi-generational way is I think vitally important, and how we constantly sort of question our own assumptions throughout this work. You know, why do we think something? Why does that feel uncomfortable? What does that mean? And all in the larger context of how levers, you know, get pulled and move other things that we might not even be thinking about.
Yeah. When you were first appointed to the GRCC Board of Trustees in June of 2020, is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
If I say
I'm going to trust you on that one. Yeah.
I looked up your bio. What were your immediate priorities and hopes for your tenure, and how have those evolved as you've moved forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, remembering that, you know, when I was starting, it was, you know, square in COVID time, and there was a lot of conversations happening around what does education look like? You know, when do we get people back? When do we not? What does hybrid look like? Like all the things that seem like they were both, you know, 200 years ago and like yesterday.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of really important work being done to think about how we stabilize, how to, like me personally, like how might I be able to bring my experiences and curiosity into the space to continue to just ask questions and learn together. And, you know, how that's changed over time, I think is, you know, as we sort of moved through that and into, you know, obviously there was a change with leadership in that time as well. Really just trying to, you know, continue to be focused on students, staff, faculty, and the broader community. Like this very much is you know, the community's college, and how do we every day ask ourselves and the collective how we're living that value out.
Yeah, absolutely. As president and CEO of the Steelcase Foundation, you've led the revision of the foundation's giving strategy. How does this work inform your work with GRCC?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question, and one that if I probably sat with and I'd have a much better, well thought out answer. Good. At the end of the day, you know, our focus in that, you know, the evolution that you mentioned at the foundation was really around thinking about how we are showing up every day as a foundation with open hands, how we are, you know, you hear me say the word curiosity a lot. I think taking a learner stance, like how do we go in paying attention to the fact that, you know, no matter how hard we try, there's certain power dynamics when, you know, we have money and other people would like, you know, to also have that money. There's certain power dynamics that align there, but what can we do every day to try to close the distance as much as possible to make things easier, to, you know, lead with trust? What is it? How might we get money out more quickly and with less restrictions and less hoops and trust that the community, you know, and those doing really important work are going to do the right things. And that learning, both, you know, our focus with K-12 education, but then also we sort of extended birth through young adult. So, you know, what does that look like from, you know, earliest in someone's life all the way through that, you know, 23, 24-year-old, all those key transitions. Those transitions are so vital, right? You know, from early childhood to elementary to middle school to high school to whatever's after that, like those key moments, like what does that mean? And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is from this multi-generational approach, like how are we thinking about whole families and all of that work? And that really has continued to help shape the way that I learn, the way that I ask questions, the way that...
Is the research you've done in the past on this topic too? Because it seems like this comes up like I read your bio and then you're talking about it. Is this like research that you've done too?
Yeah. I mean, you know, part of my doctoral dissertation was on cross-cultural empathy in adolescence, and a large part of that both from like a leadership standpoint and from just thinking about like how humans interact and build connections. The each time that there's you tick another checkbox of oh, we're the same there, we're the same there. Every time there's one of those checkboxes, the ability to empathize with that other person grows at incredible rates. That is both something to learn from and think about, but it provides some real opportunity to sort of reflect in the dangers there when we don't see those things, when we do feel like we're different, when we feel so disconnected. It's really difficult to build that empathy. And so, yeah, I would say it's a theme, but I think the large part for me around that in both research, educationally, but then also just in the work and the ways that what are we digging in to learn? We just supported a study to do an oversampling in the state of Michigan with Harvard making caring common around loneliness and disconnection, and incredible findings, but and some really scary ways.
Have you read the book Bowling Alone?
Yes. Yeah. Very similar line of argument.
Okay.
Is that book. One of the things that we found is nationally, and this is just one small example, but fathers who have kids 0 to 5 nationally, about 50% of them identify as being lonely or disconnected.
Okay.
In the state of Michigan, 73% of fathers who have kids below 5. Asking those questions like, well, why, right? Why is Michigan such an outlier there? What does that mean for us? And so, I guess to maybe sort of wrap up that general question that you asked is really trying to think about, like, it's okay to be critical, right? To be critical of things, to be critical of systems, to be critical of our programs and the way, like all those, that we have to be critical and should be. And that isn't the end. Like, it's not like we can't just sort of critique a thing and sort of, wipe our hands and sit back and say, oh, we did it. It's important to be critical. But then once we're critical, we also have to do that with care. And we have to be critical with curiosity. And so, like, how can we both be critical of the systems, interrogate our systems, our structures, our ways of being, but do that in a way that still is rooted in care for ourselves and others, and also is still really focused on curiosity. Like, what am I learning here? Why is this? And a large part of that is around the felt difference work that we're doing.
Yeah, I do believe a lot of societal problems are because people feel disconnected and not connected to each other, or they do see other people as different. I think that's a huge premise of that book too, is that those human connections. I mean, you see the people so angry with each other, and you want to bring people together, but it's like you have to have avenues, and you have to have not just being mad about it. Yeah, you have to actually do something.
Yeah. And that's why really this idea of felt difference is something we're leaning into.
Yeah.
That,
this is work through the Steelcase Foundation.
Steelcase Foundation. Yeah. We're really leaning into that we get so caught up in these really hyper-specific outcome measures, and that then it's like, oh, how do we build around that? And so, we want to improve, 8th grade science score. All right, well, what do we need to do? Oh, this one intervention sort of, had a little bit of let's pour everything into that. Let's scale that intervention. All right, let's track the number. And in the meantime, we lose sight of all the other things that may or may not be also impacted when we've zeroed in on something. And when we do that, we lose sight of how people feel, then we get these sort of false positives. We may have a little bit of movement here, but if we're, I just to use that same example, like if we're testing, it feels like, weekly, and now kids are like, I don't like school anymore. Right. Well, what did we just accomplish? And, we can use a million examples of things where we do that, where we focus on this sort of outcome measure and lose sight of how people feel. So I do think that it's important. I do think that those spaces are opportunities for us to really understand why someone feels something and not get stuck on why we think they feel what they feel, but really understanding like what it means for them. And that's not to let people and systems and structures and organizations off the hook when they're really doing harm.
Yeah.
And that's a really important but difficult balance.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like you had a lot of success at the Grand Rapids University Prep Academy with graduation rates and college acceptance rates. How has that informed, like, so when you're in meetings with, the board, does that affect like conversations that you have within college?
For sure. I mean, I think all of our experiences for, everybody in the world, but also, the trustees group is no different, are bringing our experiences from outside. I think that's what's really exciting about this particular group of trustees, wide range of experiences outside of this time together, but also very committed to hearing each other's opinions and questions and pulling, our own experiences in.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, that's something that really stays with me. And I mean, I think sometimes I get questions like, well, how did that happen? How did you, they still, Kenyatta Hill is the principal there. She was the teacher when I was there. She was assistant principal when I was principal, and she's still running the school and doing incredible work. High number of dual enrollment classes in partnership with GRCC, which has been great. And I think the answer to the question is like, well, how have you all maintained those graduation rates and those college acceptance rates? And it's one of those things where it's like, it's hard work, but it's not crazy. It's like a relentless commitment to staying engaged with every single individual child, right? I mean, I'd say we did back then, but I know Ms. Hill still continues to do this. We're following up with every kid. I got a grade report every single day that had everyone that had a C or below, and we're there and we're walking, we're going there. If they're not in school, we're going to their house and we're picking them up. Like, there's just no room to not be successful. We and we have to do every single thing in our power to at least show that we're here and we're gonna do the best we can. Now, you can't. It doesn't mean that there aren't times where that doesn't work the way you want it, but it should never be because we weren't putting in our side or our effort to make every single individual child and family feel important, feel respected, feel heard, and feel like that they were supposed to be there and we wanted them to be there.
Yeah.
And I think
so it sounds like
it
sounds like a balance between data and relationships, because it's like people are numbers, but you can't treat them that way. But you get these data reports that can help inform like the direction that you need to go, like the report of all the C's. You're going out and saying like, okay, this is the data I have, and these are the people that it's going to impact. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's a really great way to say that. And so some of it, we were talking, I mentioned like with the kids, but then it's also like looking at the data and as a staff, like, what does this mean? What trends do we see? Why, when is this happening? Why is this happening? Could we might we have some issues with our grading structure? That's like, you in a grade book, you put a certain thing in, and if that's in the only grade in a particular area, all of a sudden that's a higher percentage of your grade. Like there's. So I think you're right that it's also important for that to go like every way. Like we'll look at the data, think about relationships, and that needs to inform everything we're doing, but that needs to happen internally. It's the whole windows and mirrors situation, right? Like we can't just sit back and be like, why don't the kids do this? That conversation has to happen, and we have to look in the mirror and say, like, what structures have we created that are creating the conditions for these outcomes, and how might we continue to challenge those and get better at that too?
Absolutely. Thank you. You've been appointed to various state level groups. Can you expand on a couple of those opportunities that you've had and how have those impacted you? So it looks like Michigan STEM Council and the Michigan Consortium Advanced Networks is two of them.
Yeah. I mean, those experiences, any experience you can have that's like connected to what you're doing, but also a stretch and with a whole new group of people in a different environment, I think really can help pull and push you to think about things, question why you think something, and provide some new perspective. And I think both of those have done that. The consortium, we were looking at high-speed internet access across the state of Michigan. And, and you hear and you see these reports you see the map of Michigan and where there's high-speed access and where there's just total gaps in the state. The reports out of those areas where there aren't access, where, kids, the parking lot would be full by a library in the evening so kids could do their homework because they didn't have internet access at home.
I've had students here, actually. I've talked to students here who have actually parked in our parking lots on the weekend to do homework.
Yeah. So, I think thinking about that, my experience has been in urban settings, Detroit, here in Grand Rapids. So I think it's always a good reminder that kind of experience was a good reminder of, what's happening in some rural areas across the state of Michigan. And my STEM council was, I was the vice chair of that. And that was continued to be a really important learning experience for me. And also, I think just the work of how do we think about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math more holistically across the state. What does that mean for educators? Birth through post-secondary, what opportunities are there to increase access for women and kids of color not just into the fields, but to really get excited about it in the work. And I think, STEM provides some really interesting opportunities to provide more hands-on experiential learning. How do we get, more kids outside? How do we get, again, back to this idea of curiosity. Let's try things. What do you think is going to happen? Let's go test it. Let's see.
Have you been to the Science Day here?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I take my son to it every year, and it's such a fun experience to see all of the different things and seeing the professors interacting with the students.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite days.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think just any again, not to belabor this point, but I think any opportunity to engage with people who aren't the people who you're seeing every single day in and day out, maybe have different perspective, a broader perspective, or coming from a different geographical location or whatever, or industry. It just continues to always help kind of push thinking. And there's always something you can kind of both share, but then take from that and bring back to whether it be, my work at the foundation or the role here as a trustee.
Yeah. As a trustee, what are some specific initiatives or areas of growth you're most passionate about here over the next few years?
Yeah, I think, the one of the things that we've really focused on as a board is what's the appropriate role for us as trustees in terms of governance, that there's, one of the things that we've seen across the country at boards, both K-12 and post-secondary boards, is attempting to use those positions to direct what's happening on the ground in a way that isn't appropriate. And so I think a large part of what we're really focused on is this larger vision, trying to listen to what folks broadly are saying, use community really broadly in that, the student body, the faculty and staff, partners, folks who just might be curious about the community college or not know much. How do we hear and listen, and what are the trends? What are the themes that we hear? How does that help shape a potential way forward, especially as we look at the continued changing demographics, student body demographics? How are we sort of disaggregating the data to better understand what potential trends and themes are happening that can help inform a way forward? And how, how do we do that with real care for every single person that comes here? And we know that there are question marks right now in terms of potential funding and work streams and language and and all these things. And so how can we as a group continue to be steadfast in this larger vision of where we're going, and in making sure that we're listening every step of the way to help be advocates for what we're hearing,
Yeah.
in this particular role.
Yeah, I can see listening being such a huge part of it because, like you said before, like you could make decisions based off of, I think you said that about the school you were working at, but you could make decisions based off of what you think is right. But if you actually are communicating with the community, then you have a better understanding of why and like what each individual's experience is.
Yeah. And everything and things are always complex, right?
Yeah.
There's, someone's feeling here, and then the other person or group or thing might have another bit, and how do you take all that in and use that to help continue to try to inform at the level that we should be at as a board.
Yeah. Looking ahead to the remainder of your term in 2026, what do you hope will be the lasting impact that you make on GRCC?
Well, I don't know. I don't, that's a good question. I don't know if I think about it in that way or if I have. We chatted a little bit about the engagement that I've had with GRCC since I moved here, frankly, whether I was at UPrep and doing a lot of work that way and thinking about doing enrollment and building all those connections. When I was at WMCAT, again, a lot of connections, a lot of workforce development connections. My sister, graduated from CC and transferred to GVSU and finished and now is getting her master's degree in social work. My brother, who's a grandpa's firefighter, came back to school here and became a nurse. Wow. Just graduated about a year ago.
Congratulations to him.
Yeah, and so I think through both, my experience working through my career, then also like with my family, and then also as a trustee, I feel like I've had the luxury of seeing from so many different angles what an incredible place this is, what incredible people show up here every day to come to work and take care of, and I mean that, take care of folks who are coming to continue their education. And so, my hope is that I continue to support that important work, continue to be someone who can help amplify that out in community and advocate for not just the students, but for the faculty and staff and everybody here who is, put so much in to make this place what it is.
Yeah, thank you. Finally, since we've talked about a lot of great things, but what do you do to unwind? What are some hobbies that you have or favorite vacation spots that you take?
I read a lot. I have two girls, 14 and 11.
So that keeps you busy too.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, so we spend a lot of time together, play games. They both play volleyball. Been doing that and kind of practicing that with them, which is really fun. We go to the beach a lot. Lake Michigan. We love Lake Michigan. Yeah. So really just, I mean, that's it. I love spending time with the kids. I love, just sort of being present. I think there's so much to think about during the day when there's something really nice about going home and being a dad. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Together at GRCC. We appreciate everything that you're doing for the community, and it's making just a lasting impact, and it's very great. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Together, we got this.